Welcome to On the Horn with Dick Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. We're going to be talking to Leader Armey. This is the 6th episode of a series of 6 we've done. They're going to be available post online through all the Beck TV networks. It's on YouTube and Rumble. There's a lot of the clips from all 6 shows. You'll be able to watch and catch up on those that you missed. So Leader Armey, welcome back to On the Horn.
Well, it's nice to be back. I've enjoyed watching each of the other shows. I think we had a little fun. I hope it was something entertaining for your audience.
Well, it was fantastic. But before we get into some meat and potatoes, I want to hear about your trip you took, because while we recorded these for the viewers out there, there was about a month gap since you and I've chatted. You were out in the Smoky Mountains, I recall, with your big Goldwing Honda 50th anniversary edition, I recall.
Oh, yes, and it was wonderful. To be in the Smokies with a motorcycle is great, but this particular motorcycle performed like a dream. I said it had the agility of an alley cat, and I had so much fun on so many good rides that I know until I simultaneously pulled a muscle in my stomach and my back. And then I had the heartbreaking circumstance of being there for 12 days when I couldn't get on the bike. And to have a motorcycle in the Smokies and not be able to get on it, it's almost like a Chinese water torture. But in the end, it was all a wonderful trip, and it's so much fun to be out of the Texas heat for a while, into the mountains for a while, and of course, riding that beautiful new Goldwing of mine.
So how many miles did you end up putting on over this past month? I guess you lost 12 days, but how many miles did you actually get on?
Yeah, I didn't do too much. I only got about 3,500 miles on it, but they were good miles, and wonderful. The wonderful scenic roads were just really twisty, and that's what a biker wants.
You know, I saw one of your posts. You talked about getting up, I think, around 6 in the morning, 6:30, and you rode all day till about 2 o'clock. And I think you ended up in Texas, and it was a great quote. You said, "I didn't think about politics once." That's real retirement. That's what you. Yeah. I thought that was pretty fascinating comment.
Well, and my sister, she in her response, she saw me and trumped me and let me know that she had pushed her walker all around the place that morning. So it's nice to know that she's keeping up with me.
That's awesome. Now, on another note, when I was reading your book, you were talking about when you bought your first bike with your son, Chip, and you were talking about counter steering. So for all these non-motorcycle people that don't understand it, I thought that was interesting, because I had a motorcycle, but I was in my 18, 19, 20, and I haven't really ridden much since then. But I actually learned something reading that. Now, I haven't been able to try it out because I don't have a bike, but explain that to our viewers.
Well, the point is, when you're on 2 wheels, whether it be a bicycle or a motorcycle, you do not steer the bike. You lean the bike. And it's like you don't drive the bike, you ride the bike. And if you want to turn, you lean the bike to the left. And if you want to turn left, that is. And the way you do that is you push down and out on the left handlebar. Once you get the knack of that, and what happens with a lot of riders, it was a problem for me, was getting the idea that I'm purposely going to lean this bike over. Well, take a look at it. If you ever observe a motorcycle, every time he goes around a curve, he's leaning that bike. His wheels are straightly aligned with the bike. And it's fun to watch him. I ride many times and just watch the other riders, because it can be just as smooth and sweet as can be. But they call that counter steering. And when I first learned about it after my first accident when I was 73, I thought it was cockamamie. I said, this can't be right. So I took a lot of studying, took a lot of persuading. One thing you have to understand is you can always trust the bike. It will do what it's engineered to do. If it gets screwed up, you did it.
Very interesting. Well, I'm not sure my wife would let me on a bike at my age, and you got a few years on me, so I think I'm kind of screwed. I'm about done with my riding days, but I'm gonna have to do it through watching television. So Leader Armey, when I was going through your book, getting some thoughts, you had referred to Ted, who I believe is your father-in-law, a quote that he said, and I'd like you to talk about it a little bit. He said, in our family ethos, we had a thing that that he used to always say, I try to be as good as I can to everybody who will let me. In politics, that's a pretty challenging thing to live by.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, um, most politicians, quite frankly, try to take advantage of whomever will let them. And it's a shame because when you have an ethos like I got from Ted Bird and I practice, your initial contact with somebody is to trust them and try to do right by them. And then eventually, in too many cases, you find out, well, this was not the guy that who would let me be as good as I could. And I always said that adios is a lot easier said than anything in reconciliation. So when you find you got a varmint on your hands, the thing is get away from them, separate, do no more business with them.
You know, I thought it was interesting as I read your book, Leader, that so often you would refer to almost naivety on your part because you wanted to try and you wanted to give everybody an opportunity to be the best they could be. It's kind of a theme I've seen where you didn't really call yourself naive, but you just really wanted to give people the chance to be the best they could be, Democrat or Republican, until they proved wrong. And you obviously very regularly practice that because when they always tried to get you, there wasn't some weird stuff that you were pulling like a Tom DeLay would do.
Yeah, well, Tom DeLay was probably the most vicious conniver I knew in Washington, and he had an advantage in when he assaulted me, in that he could convince other people that because we had both were Texans that came in at the same time, that he was my good friend, and I came to understand that not to be the truth. But he used that pretension of friendship to bedevil me. And this is what happens. Yeah, I once got a compliment from a dean, an academic dean, which I treasure all my life. He said, Dick Armey is a man totally without guile. And I believe I pretty much get that correct. But what I learned over the years is if you are without guile in your own self, you're slow to recognize it in others. And while I had a lifetime commitment born out of a conversation with my uncle when I was about 6 years old to never commit office politics against somebody, I was not as alert as I should have been in guarding myself from it. Just because I won't do it doesn't mean it won't be done to me. And Tom DeLay was the most villainous guy I ever dealt with in that regard. And he caused a lot of mischief, wasted a lot of my time, and in some degree, in some circle, resulted in a tarnish on my reputation, which of course is very regrettable, but you got to live with the good and the bad. Take it when you can, fix it up wherever you can, and then move on.
You know, I think that's so true in politics. Earl Strindon, a leader here in the House many years ago, used to say in politics, perception's reality. And so often guys like DeLay who go out and do those kind of things, people pick up things and they hear it. They never hear the back channel, the back story. So those accusations linger with many times the person's whole career. So,
well, that is right. As I said in the preface, that is why I wrote the book. When I die, I can tell you there are going to be at least three ugly stories about me in my obituary that my grandchildren will read, and they're simply not true. So my initial incentive for writing the book was to set the record straight. So someday in the future, when one of my grandchildren reads something ugly about me and he turns and he says, did Grandpa really do that? It'll break their little hearts. And I got at least 3 places in the book where I literally say, no, honey, Grandpa didn't do that. And I tell the real story of what actually happened so they can know exactly what did happen and how the misrepresentation that came to be popular, what should I say, political vicious folklore.
What I like and what you've done in your book is you call it the way it is, and you're very honest. Where there's issues that were going on, it just a lot of transparency. So all the viewers out there, if you haven't, I encourage you to get this book and read it because it's fascinating that way. I'm going to pivot, leader, to.
Let me just quickly remind you, I
Please.
call it on myself too. There
You
are 3
do.
or 4 places in the book where I say I really did a dumb thing, or even on a couple of occasions where I did a mean thing. I look at, I want to be accountable for what I did. I'll take any rap I can and live with it, but I'd be danged if I'm going to live with a bum rap.
Well, I think that's what's so true about so much in Washington. When you talk about the guileless and not, being a person without guile, that is absolutely impossible in Washington, D.C. So the fact that you actually went out there in the midst of that to try to be who you were, to being true to yourself, to what your family taught you, your father, and growing up, and that's quite a remarkable story. So, Leader Armey, we're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to pick up on your 1999-2000 session. We have Leader Denny Hassard, and coming out of the majority, and all of a sudden you have people just didn't seem to have the energy, and you talk about that a little bit. So we've been talking to Leader Dick Armey, Congressman from Fort Worth, Texas, North Dakota native. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Stop out to our facility, Highway 22 South. Let us build a truck for you.
Hello and welcome to the MHA Interpretive Center. It's the perfect stop along the Lewis and Clark Trail and the cultural hub of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. Nestled along the shores of Lake Sagagawea in Newtown, North Dakota, 1 mile west of the Four Bears Casino. You can enjoy amphitheater performances, art exhibitions, and educational workshops utilizing our Living Cultural Center. Enjoy some coffee, browse our gift shop, and learn about the original people of this land. Learn more at mhanation.com/interpretive center.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza.
Home on the Range offers a nurturing place for teens who may have just come from an unsafe or traumatic environment. Here, they receive therapy and education services centered around animals, and the surrounding nature provides opportunities for work, fun, and healing. Life skills learned at Home on the Range are carried with residents when they return to the community with new talents and a greater appreciation for themselves and others.
Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
West River Equipment of Mandan is here to help you maintain peak productivity in your operation. As an authorized dealer for many high-quality equipment lines, we have the new and used equipment it takes to make your farming, ranching, or construction operation profitable and efficient. West River Equipment also has the parts on hand and the experienced technicians in our shop to get your equipment back in action fast. Find what you need at West River Equipment on Old Red Trail in Mandan.
Welcome back to Open Range. I'm your host, Gary Emineth, talking to leader Dick Armey, Republican from Fort Worth, Texas congressman, served as the majority leader during not the Reagan, but the Republican Revolution when they finally got control of the House. So, Leader Armey, I would like to talk a little bit about 1999 into 2000, 106 session. I know there's lots of them you had, getting your head around each one of them, but you made the statement, you came back, Denny Hastert was the new leader, and it said the House was worn out and could no longer be driven to hard work, long hours, and big dreams. And that, I mean, it was kind of short-lived. I mean, the Democrats were there for 40 years control, and the power that you guys had in the majority, you're saying that it kind of started fizzling out. They just didn't have the energy. Speak to us about that a little bit.
Well, we lost the innovators, Newt and myself, and some of our younger chairmen when we first took the majority. We literally led the legislative agenda of the nation for 4 years from the House of Representatives. That's quite remarkable. But Denny Hastert was kind of an old school sort of guy, and he had a line that he got from Bob Michael, the guy that had prevented us from getting the majority in the first place, said, "I'm going to be a good speaker for my president." Well, that's not your job. You should be a speaker for the Congress of the United States, the House of Representatives. You're elected by the entire House. House is a separate and equal body, and your allegiance is to those members, not to the president. But so Denny basically, he stifled the innovation. We tried on a couple of occasions for a couple of things, but we just didn't have the energy at the top of the line that we had from Newt. You know, Newt would pick up any ball and run with it, you know. Well, quite frankly, even if you had to have others point him in the right direction, the one thing is, Newt was getting things done. And but Denny was that way. He waited upon the president to tell him what he wanted. There's too much of that, by the way. Reagan did it in a nice, orderly fashion. He would go to the Hill, he would recruit people in the House and the Senate to sponsor the bill, participate in the writing of the bill, introduce the bill, and be Reagan's sponsor of the legislation. Now, that is the cooperative, respectful relationship that should be carried on. Denny didn't quite have enough sense of my commitment is to the House first, to draw a boundary on the speaker, on the president.
You talk about Karl Rove in your book, when Karl came in and being a Texan as well and wanted to wasn't supportive when you first ran, and then comes in and starts kind of telling you the way it is, because obviously right after this, Bush gets elected. That's a whole nother situation. But talk to us a little bit about Karl Rove. I'm not necessarily that big a fan of Karl. I do appreciate what he has to say sometimes.
You know, I say throughout the book that every now and then the Lord will give you a magic moment and deliver something. When I was running in 1984, Karl Rove just laughed at me. He said, "You don't have a heck of a chance. You're just wasting your time, and you're sure not going to waste my time." Well, that was the only conversation I ever had with Karl Rove until he came up to brief me as majority leader about what the President 43 Bush agenda was going to be. And he couched it in a peculiar language. He said, "Well, the president and I want to do this. The president and I want to do this." Well, he had quite a strut going on. You know, he was really putting himself in the front row. So I patiently listened to him, realizing this guy is a Coca-Cola cowboy. And at the end, I said, "Well, you know, we're going to work as hard as we can. And we, of course, appreciate the president. We'll try to do what we can to be helpful on you and the president achieving your objectives." He left quite satisfied with himself, and I left just kind of shaking my head. Who is this Who the heck does this political hack think he is?
Yeah, you mentioned that here he's a political hack and the government payroll is a political operative in a sense. And you always had you tested that because, hey, when you're doing government work, there's places for the politics, the campaign, there's another place to run government when you're in that position.
You don't, to me, you do your campaign work, you do your politics, you help other people with their campaigns, that's fine. Then you go in your office as a elected member of Congress or the White House, and you do your work at the White House. You don't put the two things together. So, no, I was never a big fan of political hacks in the White House.
So, Leader Armey, as long as we're talking about Karl Rove, I was going to talk about George Bush 43 later in our interview here. But as long as we're talking about Karl Rove, give me your impressions of President Bush 43.
Well, I was not impressed with. First time I ever spoke to the man on the phone, he referred to his father as the old man, and that just ran all over me. What disrespect. Now, George Herbert Walker Bush and I didn't like each other very much. But all of a sudden I realized I got more respect for the former president of the United States than his own son does. And the more I talked to him, I saw him and so forth, I just thought he was a overprivileged underachiever whose daddy greased the skids and now he's got a big shot job. And he's just a smart aleck, preppy kid who never made an inch of ground in his own life, thinking he's really important because he got a great position. I never really got over that. I never was impressed with him. I don't think he was a real guy of personal accomplishment through hard work and risk. So I just really never took him very seriously. He didn't make his own way in life. And the real guys of the world have made their own way in life.
When you look at 9/11, which the president Bush ended up having to take on a month, just first year into his campaign. Let's talk about the Patriot Act, what went on and all that went on with that. Because, you were a defender, protector of liberty and what needed to be done. And you fought hard against that, but people were panicking. And let's talk about that because there's a lot of libertarians who feel that they went too far, the government. And I'd like to have people hear kind of your story around that.
Well, of course they were panicky. I mean, it was a scary time, but President Bush had too many people around him, most notably the vice president and secretary of defense, that had a pre-existing agenda with respect to, say, Iraq. A lot of the agencies had pre-existing agenda with increasing their power and their authority and their control of the American people. So, of course, the first big catastrophe that came out of the legislative panic that followed 9/11 was the Patriot Act, which was probably the most comprehensive trespass against the liberty of the American citizen of any single piece of legislation I ever saw. It was horrible. And so there were a handful of us that dared to resist it, but we were just railroaded. So what we did is try to do as much damage control as we could. I got some sunset provisions in it, thinking that maybe in a later time when people kind of regain their wits about them, we might be able to deal with this again. And then, of course, the invasion of Iraq, which was it was on the agenda. I think Bush kind of got used by his own people a little bit in that, but then again, if he had gone through some of the school of hard knocks and seen some of the troubles and tribulations and double crosses and double dealing along the way, he might have been more alert to the trespasses against even him by his overzealous associates. So it was a terrible tragedy. We made even worse by the legislative irresponsible, in this case, principally of the Republican Party in office. And I probably feel a greater kinship to the libertarians on this than I do certainly to the Republican Party. It was a tough time for me personally, and once again, I got double crossed by somebody I thought was a reliable and responsible friend, and resulted in me making the worst vote I ever made in Congress. And it's probably the greatest heartbreak that I suffer by way of what did I do to be harmful to others. And yeah, it was not a happy time for those of us who believe in liberty and understand the Constitution to be something to be revered, not respected, revered. But yeah, things got way out of control.
Do you think the military, they always call it the military industrial complex, I know you were riding your motorcycle, so you maybe never saw where President Trump and Hegseth brought all the generals in and sat them down for a little talk and talked about wokeness. And do you think Trump's engaging the military like he is it overdue and needed to be done? Does there need to be some corrective action from your perspective?
Yeah, I do. It needed to be corrected. And the same wokeness, foolishness that crept into business in the media and so forth had crept into the military. And they'd gotten lazy, and they'd gotten sloppy, and they'd gotten involved with things that had nothing to do with defending this country, and probably eroded our ability to do that, because to a large extent, your standing on military matters becomes a question of, are you respected abroad? Do you think that military men across the globe were not amused by our girly men walking around the Pentagon in their skirts? It certainly didn't impress me a lot. We got a tough bunch here. We got to deal with them. If they scratch their fingernail polish, they might throw a fit. And it was just not a good image of what a military should look like and act like. And it got to be, I think it got to be a thing that seriously needed being corrected in the interest of military effectiveness.
Leader, we're going to go to the break. We come back. I want to talk about China, because there's some important legislation that came on related to free trade with China that you were in the middle of, and but also put it in the context of what's going on today. So we've been talking to Leader Dick Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson is a family-owned dealer with expert staff that know their products front to back. We stock over 150 units of all types and can custom order a trailer with the unique features and capabilities you require for brands you can trust. Our experienced service team is the reason we're also the best place to have your trailer customized or repaired. Count on Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson to keep you hauling.
Are you looking for something special or one of a kind? At Bassett Motors, we can help you find exactly what you want.
Come on in and experience how small town hospitality and personal service can make car buying a pleasure.
We know interest rates are important to you. We have multiple lenders to negotiate your lowest payment.
Visit us on Highway 281 in Carrington, North Dakota, and online at BassettMotors.com. Bassett Motors, where our customers send their friends.
Yeah, U.S. Cattlemen is a member organization that each member has a vote in anything we do with policy. We're representing the independent cattleman or the cow-calf guy or an independent feeder or whatever. We like to support the independent producer. Talking about mandatory ID, we're talking about cool, we're talking about all the legislation that's going to be coming down with the new administration. There's going to be lots of moving and shaking, so always check us out at our website, uscattleman.org.
I'm $27,000 in credit card debt.
Okay.
You have to radically do something different, because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting.
Now's not the time to be doing math. The time to be doing math was when we didn't go into $200,000 of debt.
If you are freaked out and you're stuck in these debt payments and you think it has to be a part of your life, it doesn't.
We are Ladies of Another View. Join us every weekday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. as we discuss the big topics from North Dakota, the nation, and around the world.
We chat with everyone from celebrities and medical professionals to politicians, local business owners, and neighbors about the topics and stories that affect all of us.
We are unscripted and uncensored real news from real people. So join us every weekday morning for Ladies of Another View on Beck.
Welcome back to On the Horn with Leader Dick Armey. Leader Armey, before the break, we were talking about the military and worrying about their skirts and fingernails and not being this warrior ethos that we need to have. But in the light of the world where we're at today with China and Russia, it's a crazy time right now. But before we get into the present, there was a big push for China free trade, and it was kind of while you were in there, and there was a lot of pressure put on you in dealing with that. And being a free trader, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, that was, and of course, I'm an Adam Smith free trade guy. There was a legitimate point of view which shared. I first saw it in Ronald Reagan. We opened trade with China. We helped them become exposed to Western freedoms, and you will find freedom will grow in China. But at any rate, the thing you have to understand, China trade didn't really affect a big change in China trade. We were operating on a year-to-year basis. So most favored nation clause, which by the way, we had to ditch that because a lot of people didn't have the stomach for it, and I understand that. But normal trade relations with China had been going on a per annum basis. We made it permanent. I look back now, the Chinese are not the Chinese government is not a trustworthy institution, because communism only functions on control and contrivement and double dealing, that sort of thing. So I think what happened was we should have had more rigorous discipline with respect to access available to Chinese commerce, to American intellectual property, say, and even to some extent American property, and more disciplined control or regulation of the behavior of our own commercial people in dealing with them. So it hasn't been as good an outcome as we had dared to hope for at the time we made it possible. But it is not something that is beyond our control. And I think President Trump is probably, as he is the first president in our lifetime since Reagan to talk back to the Democrats, is also the first president in our lifetime to talk back to the globalists that are so interwoven into the international economy. I don't like tariffs. But at first, I don't like tariffs levied against us. America has been a kind and generous nation throughout the world for most of our history, especially during the Great Wars and after. And it hasn't been appreciated. Trump has a tough tariff policy. It is not a philosophy. It is a strategy, and it boils down to this: telling nation after nation, look, we've been good to you, we've been good world citizens, we like world commerce, but you have not been fair in your trading practices with us. We want tariffs lower, and if in fact reciprocating to your excessive tariff is what's going to wake you up, that's what we will do. If you want American tariffs lower, then lower your own. Now, if he's successful with his strategy, people like me, lifetime free traders who despise tariffs, will find that we have reduced tariffs worldwide. And that will then make it a very good political, commercial outcome.
You know, it's interesting and how Europe has, taken advantage of us. I mean, after World War II, granted, that's what America's generosity was to help build it up. But at the end of the day, we're still paying all these bills for them. And they pushed their socialistic agenda, if you will, and open borders. And it's about time we step in and do what we've done. So I appreciate what Donald Trump has done as the presidency.
Look, if you want to be arrogant and tell us how the world should work, you better start working in the world. We're done carrying you, right? Quite frankly, we've always paid more than our fair share of every international organization to which we've lent any affiliation. And the UN right now is probably as anti-American as any organization in the country. Why should we pay the bills? To have that bunch of clowns sit up there and mock us and undergird us with respect to the world. I think Trump's got a strong hand here. And he said, look, if you want us to be in the same institution, then let's have an institution that shows appreciation and gives respect. It's not too much to ask for all we've done. Where would China and Europe and Germany have been after World War II if it hadn't been for the American government helping them get back on their feet?
So, Leader Armey, do you think with all that we've done around the world, and now Trump's bringing us back to focusing on making America great again, looking internally, our government tends to, he's pushing some limits on like getting involved with Intel and taking ownership. And, but God bless him for taking on some of these institutions internally with some of the things he's doing, where I think he sometimes moves between capitalism and socialism. But it is a strategy, isn't it? The way he kind of pushes, even with the pharmaceutical industry that he just talked about with Pfizer just a few days ago. Now it's Trump RX or something. But he's pushing boundaries in ways that I think in some ways it's really good for America because we've just been we've been kitty Wonka for so long.
Well, I don't know that Donald Trump's the first one to become intrusive in this regard. If you take a look at TARP, the Bush 43 solution to the financial crisis the government created. You have the Secretary of Treasury dictating terms to the banking industry. Maybe they needed it, but that is certainly a heavy hand. And then take a look at the implementation of TARP, how President Obama pretty well took over the management, especially of the automobile industries and the unions, putting their people on the boards and dictating things of this nature. So it isn't that Donald Trump has been the first to become intrusive in these kinds of ways, or even the most intrusive in these kinds of ways. The difference is when liberals trespass against common sense, good governance, and free markets and individual liberty, they get a pass in the press. The narrative always passes over their sins and exaggerates what little virtue they have. Donald Trump gets just the opposite. he is more hated for what has been alleged that he has done than the left is disliked for what they've actually done. And it's because, Democrats understand if you control the narrative and if you can get all the narrative goons that are out there in the press and so forth to parrot your message, you can have a big effect on the public's understanding. So I don't know any person ever held office in this country subject to more vicious and consistent and comprehensive misrepresentation than what has befallen Donald Trump. So, cut the guy a little slack. He's got to fight back the best he can in a world where there's only one small group that loves him, and that's the group he speaks to.
Question for you. In 2000, when Bush won in Florida, that happened in the whole election process, and you refer to voter fraud that occurred. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, about how the Democrats' mindset, when they started doing these mail-in ballots and this whole, the train just came off the rails. Talk to us a little bit about it from your perspective.
Well, first of all, systematic, organized voter fraud was instituted in 1993 with something called motor voter. So the creeping intrusions of different kinds of voter fraud systematically by the Democrat Party was not new when President Bush got elected. It was probably in its infancy. But the fact is, there's no doubt in my mind that there was a serious problem in Florida at the time, if nothing else. The announcing of projections on the outcome of the race by the networks when the panhandle had polls still open. So I think that what I liked about I saw in that instance is the whole Republican establishment rallied to George W. Bush, and they were able to fight off the Democrats in that recount, and he won the president. Now you flash forward when you got the blatant, even far more grievous voter fraud, steal of the election of Donald Trump, the Republican voter establishment not only turns their back on him, lends him no help, but they condemn him for even protesting the atrocity that had pulled against him. So I don't know that I was particularly had any particular thoughts, except that I think we got the right outcome in Florida. There's no doubt in my mind. For example, one of the things we're currently discovering is the corruption of the census. Well, that was Al Gore's #1 plan. This census corruption would have been implemented right after the Florida countdown if Al Gore had won. So it was all part of a very comprehensive plan by the Democrats, implemented piece by piece, over and over, creeping and creeping, to take over the election system of this country. It's not new. It's been there all along. And Bush had the first real electoral confrontation with it, and he got lucky. But don't you think for a minute they didn't learn where their slip-ups were in and losing round one.
Leader Armey, we're going to go to the break. We come back. I want to pivot now to Freedom Works and your time leaving Congress and some of the things you've done. And then I want to leave with the thought of what you want to be remembered by when we finish up with our last segment. So we've been talking to Leader Dick Armey. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I want to tell you, Lady Blue and I, we got a lot of miles together, but you know what? You and I got a lot of miles together as well. And all I want to do is bring to you the information on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations. So I'm going to continue to travel the world and unearth the stories that make it possible that we can live in a free United States of America.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza. Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
West River Equipment of Mandan is here to help you maintain peak productivity in your operation. As an authorized dealer for many high-quality equipment lines, we have the new and used equipment it takes to make your farming, ranching, or construction operation profitable and efficient. West River Equipment also has the parts on hand and the experienced technicians in our shop to get your equipment back in action fast. Find what you need at West River Equipment on Old Red Trail in Mandan.
Ashley, North Dakota is where life moves a little slower, but never gets dull. From hunting, camping, and fishing to safe streets where kids can be kids, this is the best of small town living. And Ashley offers everything you need, from healthcare to hardware to countless ways to stay active. Here, we've invested in our future with major upgrades to roads, parks, and education. Whether you're here for the day or here for life, you'll find Ashley's where you ought to be.
Since 1980, Circle Sanitation has been providing exceptional waste hauling services to every customer, big or small. Whether you just need reliable weekly pickup, roll-off containers for major projects at home or the construction site, or your needs are somewhere in between, Circle Sanitation has you covered. We're a locally owned family business and currently seeking dependable men and women to add to our team. Wages are competitive and benefits comprehensive. Call us today or visit circlesanitation.com.
Welcome back to Open Range. I'm your host, Gary Emineth, talking to Leader Dick Armey, Congressman from Texas, North Dakota native. Leader Armey, you leave. We have so much more we could talk about your time in Washington and with your economics and your background. I had a bunch more questions, and maybe someday I'll rope you back in to do this again someday. But I want to respect your time. And when you left Washington and you got involved with Freedom Works, and I want to talk a bit about that whole Tea Party, the involvement of Freedom Works and your involvement in it, which really changed the shape of the country. Talk to us a little bit about not only your involvement, but the impact it had on who we end up electing.
Well, first of all, I had known Freedom Works as Citizens for a Sound Economy all the time I was in Washington. And I knew them to be a well-organized and effective grassroots organization with a principal focus on economic issues, the only one in existence. So when I made my retirement plans, I saw to it that I cut myself a little niche in Freedom Works. And I had my affiliation there, which was quite frankly not a highly lucrative thing for me, but it allowed me to keep my oar in the water in the manner I thought most effective. And the Citizens for a Sound Economy was a wonderfully effective grassroots organization. I was impressed to find out how much they worked at all levels of government, and they were nationwide, and they were effective, and they had the right model. And we grew And at some point, we did a short-lived merger with Jack Kemp, which resulted in a change of the name to Freedom Works. But when we had this clarion call during the big TARP scandal for a new Tea Party movement, and people across the country, all over the country, tried to get themselves organized into Tea Party chapters, they quite rightly said, well, how do you do this? And is anybody doing it? And where can we learn? And they found our organization. In particular, they found a bright young man, Brendan Steinhauser, who took them on. He became, as it were, the terminal central focal point for information flow for the various chapters of Tea Party enthusiasm. He was the guru. He was the guy they all went to. They all referred each other to him. He referred among them. And as much as anybody, he built that organization. Now, obviously, everybody's to get their credit for what they did in their own communities. But I can tell you with great confidence that have there not been a Brendan Steinhauser found by all these people wishing to organize, there wouldn't have been a Tea Party movement. And it was a big movement, and it was a successful movement. Had the same people from across the country that had been the parole people at one time, now they became the Tea Party, and later they became the Trumpers. But the fact is, in the 2010 election, the Tea Party movement gets as much credit as anybody in this country, and as much as either of the two political parties for the outcome of that election. It was a grand time. We did good work. Our folks did a great job. What happened was subsequently to 2010, we had, I didn't realize it, but we had some sneaky back biting, conniving people that became more interested in their own personal prosperity than the prosperity of one of the greatest grassroots organizations in the history of the country. And finally, it resulted in the whole thing breaking up. And it was a terrible, tragic thing, but this is what happened. So I'm going to take you back to my grandfather, who told me years ago, if you take any tool and use it for a purpose to which it's not intended, you're going to corrupt that tool. So what happened was the Tea Party fell apart, or not. It got consumed by the pro movement. Freedom Works fell apart because it was destroyed from within. I got on, moved on with my life. I was 72 at the time. I was just getting, frankly, just too old to take over the running of that organization and rebuild it after the damage that had been done. So I went out and I've been retired ever since. And frankly, it was a necessary thing to do. And I think probably the only feasible thing to do because so much damage had been done.
You know, I'd say even in North Dakota, the Ron Paul movement was a major force. They actually, the libertarians, you know, in the party, the kind of the middle squishy Republicans were like, keep those Ron Paul people away. And I, as a chairman of the party at the time, embraced them. I said, we needed that because you might recall we had Dorgan, Conrad, and Pomeroy, three liberal in Washington. And I said, if we need to bring them into our fold, if we're going to be a majority to get rid of those rascals, which we eventually did. And the Ron Paulers played a very significant part in the Republican Party and the Tea Party movement in the state of North Dakota. And I don't know if that was as true nationally. Can you speak to that?
No, he was there. The libertarians were a big part of our movement, but the Tea Party movement had probably the biggest political tent, the most inclusive political tent of any in the country. At the time. And so we had a lot of Christian conservatives, we had homeschoolers, we had people whose issues were abortion, we had economic conservatives, that was our major focus. And we had the libertarian emphasis on individual liberty and human and fundamental God-given human rights. And yeah, it was a big part of our movement. We were proud to be in association with them, and they made a good contribution to all that was done.
So, Leader, we got about 3-4 minutes. What do you want to be remembered for your time in politics?
Well, for my time in office,
I
never got into politics.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
I would like to be remembered as a guy that understood the system, had real serious objectives in mind with respect to what he would do for the nation in that office, and had some effectiveness in doing it. And all the while I was true to myself. And I used to say, I have my Popeye moments. I am who I am. And I did that. I remember a great quote from Rob Roy: honor is a gift a man he gives himself. I hope I gave myself that. To a decent, honorable man, effective at his work, and never once bringing home an embarrassment to his family. You know, I think the word they use for such a person is statesman. I'd like to be remembered as a statesman for the time I spent in public office. I'd like to be known as an economist for who I am professionally. And of course, of all the titles I've ever had, I now live with the best one ever. I'd like to be known as the best grandpa, the best husband ever. I'm a good family man. So, you know, I don't worry a lot about it, because in the end, God will remember me, and I'll have my place in heaven or I won't, depending on the most true judge of all.
Amen to that. Well, Leader Armey, we appreciate it. And I appreciated you. I had a number of comments from people who came back to me and said they were really touched by your openness about your faith and how you wrestled to the point of being a follower of Christ. And so I heard that multiple times from people.
I hope it's encouraging to others, because I can tell you, it is a great source of comfort for me. And I feel bad for people who don't have that.
Leader Armey, I want to thank you for being a part of this series for 6 hours, sitting with me and talking through your career as an economist, as a father, as a North Dakotan, as a Texan. And thank you for joining us on the Horn.
Well, thank you for having me. And if we want to try to pull it off again in the future, we'll work on a deal.
We'll do that. I'll come bother you. I promise you. You have too much to say. There's too many good things in your book, and there's too many axioms we never even covered yet. So, Leader Armey, thank you for joining us.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed them. I hope they've been worth people's time.
They absolutely been. So thank you, Leader Armey. So we've been talking to Leader Dick Armey, North Dakota native, who went on to be a quite renowned economist, a professor in Congress, majority leader, helping Republicans take back 1994. So we thank you for watching this series. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Thanks for watching.
Now you can have the personalized forecast at your fingertips when you need it. Beck's exclusive Weather Insight is information tailored to you. Radar, weather alerts, forecasts, and videos. Download the free Weather on Beck News app. Search your app store now.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. Join me on the trip. and unearth the stories on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations of American citizens like our forefathers did.